Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Global Book Network, the show where we sit with authors and ask them about their books and their crafts. My name is Global Boys, and I'm excited to be in the booth, so to speak, today with a very, very special guest. We're talking about the author of the book Chestnut Hollow Blues, Adventures of an Illegitimate Child, Dr. Raymond Edward Janifer. Thank you so much for being on the show here today.
Thank you, Flobo.
Hey, the pleasure is all mine. Before we hit record, we're just talking about life and how we grew up and all of that. And, writing a memoir is always an interesting process. So let me ask you this. What was a moment in your life you looked back at the life you lived and go, I got to put pen to paper and make this a story that I can share?
Well, I had planned it all along. However, the demands of being a professor superseded that. I had to produce scholarly writing, which took a lot of time and attention, etc. And because I was in the English department, they did not value fiction or nonfiction or imaginative writing as much as they did scholarly writing. I retired about 5 years ago, and now I had the time and also the mental space to reflect, and it just came out.
Yeah. Growing up in Pennsylvania, is it? Central Pennsylvania?
Norristown, Pennsylvania, 17 miles west of Philly.
That's what's up. Well, talk to me about that. I'm a Brooklyn kid. I mean, I've heard
Mhm.
stories of Philly. It's close, but a world away, right? So, what's it like growing up in that time period, growing up in that city when you came up?
Well, being a young black guy and I was in the hood, it was pretty tough. So, I started out typical street kid, street fights, getting in trouble and all of that. But then there were some older guys that I saw. They were just so mellow and so sharp. And they had a social club called Oak Terrace Social Club. So I decided I wanted to be a part of that. They, of course, looked at me and said, well, get back, young boy. You're too young. And so I got together with some of my guys and we started Little Oak Social Club.
Okay.
And it was a bunch of guys that decided the streets weren't for them. We wanted to be sharp dressers. We wanted to be ladies' men. And we wanted to imitate the older guys. And that's how I started easing away from street life. I should have carried my academics with me, though, because I kind of dropped the academics and everything was social life and athletics. And that's how I got myself in trouble.
Yeah. What was the dream back then? Because I will say, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Power Ranger, but they weren't around back then. So, when you were a kid growing up, was there like a dream to leave the neighborhood, to see the world, to do something great with in the
Um,
neighborhood?
we were a small town and we were pretty country. Even though if you asked one of us, you'd say, well, where are you from? We'd say Philly, but we were pretty far removed from Philly. So there were two gentlemen who were medical doctors in our town that I really admired, particularly a gentleman named Dr. Stanford, because he had a little red 57 T-Bird and he got a lot of respect. And that was back in the days when you were sick. He came to you after hours with his little black bag and came upstairs to your bedroom. And then the other doctor was Dr. Berkeley Georges, and he was uptown. He didn't do the house call thing, but everyone respected them in our little town. And I couldn't tell you then, but there was something different about the way that they were treated, the way that they talked to people. And in about sixth grade, I got involved in athletics. And I thought, this is very local. But then I had an older cousin that went away to actually play football it's now University of Maryland Eastern Shore, but it used to be Maryland State College. And he got drafted into the pros and he played with some pros, Art Shell, Emerson Boozer, Johnny Sample. And when he would come home, man, was he clean. Plus, he had the Letterman's jacket, the little Jeff hat, nice little car, beautiful woman. So I said, that might be for me.
Yeah. Oh man,
And go ahead.
I think we had this shared experience when we were kids. You see that one person that has it all put together, and you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
I want some of that.
Yeah, and then I had an uncle, Jimmy Smith, the world's greatest jazz organist. That was my mother's oldest brother. And he would come home and talk about being in Paris, being in Berlin, being in Rotterdam, being in Portugal. And there used to be a theater in Philly called the Uptown Theater. And he was part of a show called The Cavalcade of Jazz. And because I was with him, we would go in through the back door. And all of these jazz musicians had their cars parked out back. And I saw Jaguars and Porsches, Mercedes, MGs, Austin Healey's. And what really struck me was these were young Black men driving these cars.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go in the door backstage there, and I don't know the names of the suits, but they were suited out, and it was like tailor-made suits, beautiful haircuts, all kind of women flipping around, and everyone treated them with respect. So the second part of that was that I wanted to travel. I wanted to dress like that. I wanted to drive like that.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, my behavior was not matching my dream because I wasn't doing anything in school, which led to me dropping out at 10th grade because I knew I couldn't pass. And then I was lost and had to try to find my way back and didn't know how to do it. And I had an adoptive parent that died, a mother, and that really, really lost me. You know, I think today they would say I was clinically depressed.
Mm-hmm.
But back in those days, since I was a young Black man, he was bad.
Right.
He didn't do what he was supposed to do. He's recalcitrant. And yeah. So if I had known, I would have sought some treatment or something. But with my environment, lower Black working class, psychologists and things like that, they're like, your mother's dead, get over it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're wasting your time, man, and you can't do anything about it, you know. So no one ever really sat down to talk to me about it. And that was my world because I was in private Catholic school. So she kept me with the starched shirts, the warm lunches, you know, the clean laundry. And if you read my book, when she died, my adopted father kind of went in the tank, moved the prostitute in the house, stayed drunk all the time, gambled all night, never cooked. And then one night, the prostitute attacked me in my bedroom and we fought. And then that's when I reunited with my family, which luckily was around the corner. But, you know, the life that I knew as an only child deteriorated between 9th and 10th grade.
And when something like that happens, because it could feel like you're out there on the ocean all by yourself on a piece of driftwood, but
Yes.
But what brought you back? What made you say there has to be something better than the life I'm living right now?
As I was telling you about my uncle that went to college to play football, the television networks used to be just the major networks, but cable came in and they started covering the local colleges. And there was a college called Villanova, which was not far from where I was. and they started having their early black players, Wally Jones, George Leftwich, Jim Washington, George Raveling. And I thought, man, that must be a good life. You know, you go to college, you get to travel with the team, because when they weren't playing at home, they play in the Garden, the Mecca. And so that became my dream. Even though I tried to make it happen athletically, the mistake that I made was that I didn't try to make it happen academically. And then I got recruited by University of Pennsylvania to play basketball. And my major rival, the guy I hated because it was always between he and I, was actually playing for Penn. And then, of course, in those days, you went to the admissions office, and I just didn't have the grades or the standardized test. And, you know, it was kind of like, damn, he beat me again, but I'm going to win the war. He keeps winning the battles.
Right.
Yeah. So I just decided that I would clean all that up. And then I was surprised. It was very difficult at first. And then it became, I don't want to say it was easy, but all that Catholic school training just kind of clicked back in. And I was able to kind of put my foot on the accelerator and catch up and actually supersede a lot of folks. But I didn't anticipate it. I was one of those people, I hated high school, but I loved college.
Okay. Why? Because of the social aspect, or it was a different pace of learning, or?
Well, yeah, it was a different pace of learning, but it seemed like I was an adult. You know, in Catholic school, it was like, turn left here, turn right here, sit down, get up, be dismissed. And in college, you know, you had your classes. It seems like when I had a choice of whether to go or not, I would go all the time. Mm-hmm. But when it was compulsory, something about me would be like, there's nothing they can do to me if I don't go. That type of thing. Yeah. So college I really liked. And, you know, high school, what I don't understand is you're in there for like 8.5 hours or something, 7.5 hours. Mm-hmm. At college, I'd have like 2 50-minute classes a day, 3 classes a day, 50 minutes, Tuesday, Thursday, 2 90 minutes. Hey, I can handle this. And then I was playing ball, and that was a place where, you know, you had to play if you wanted to continue past high school. And then I took a writing class, and there was a young white instructor, and this guy looked redneck. He had on the white t-shirt with the cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve, the cowboy boots with the metal tips on the back and front. And we had to write. And I did pretty well, so he called me in. And he asked me about, well, had I ever written before, and what was I planning? And, you know, maybe you should think about becoming an English major, which was a shock to me because I had started out in biology because I wanted to be a physician. And I'm listening to him, but I'm looking at him with this redneck getup. And I said, well, where are you from? And then he explained to me that he was from Nevada, and he had just gotten his graduate degree at University of Reno. And I said, geez, how old are you? And he was in his late 20s. And I said, well, you became a professor in your late 20s? And he said, yeah. He said, you know, they're looking for Black professors because this was 68 and Black studies was coming in and cultural diversity. And they were bringing all of these Black students to campus after Martin Luther King got shot. And so I looked around the office and I saw all these books. And I said, does that mean I would have to read all those books? And he said, no. He said, you just need to know how you can find what you need out of these books. And I said, I can do that. And he became my mentor all the way through my master's degree. And that's how I went from basketball player to scholar at the university level.
That is a fantastic story, because not only that you put the work in, put the proof in the pudding, but there really was someone that invested in sharing time and saying you are good when you didn't even know what direction you wanted to go to the time, or a different direction at the time. And you're an educator now. You said you were retired, but I'm sure that you had a chance to pay that forward when you were doing your academic career. Yeah.
Every chance I got, and some people want to do it and some people don't. And I think one of the real things you have to realize is that everyone moves at their own pace. And sometimes you can stimulate them, but other times, they just want to get through that particular course. But yeah, there are certain times when you hit it off with the person and they want to accept your direction, or they admire you and that type of thing. So it was challenging. I enjoyed it. I miss it sometimes, but I'm happy not to be coming home with a briefcase full of papers.
Fair enough. In the creation of Chestnut Hollow Blues, was there a particular passage or chapter that was a bit challenging to write or to get right for publication?
Yeah, the early life, when things were what people would consider bad. Because when I got adopted, I lived like a little prince. But my brothers and sisters were out there with my 15-year-old mother and going through hell, domestic violence, homelessness, etc., which didn't mean a lot to me because I was so well taken care of. But I'm laughing because I didn't know I grew up in the ghetto until I went to college, Intro to Sociology. And there was a book by a guy named Gunnar Myrtle, and he described the ghetto. I was like, what's up with that? He's talking about my hood and he's calling it a ghetto.
Yeah.
But, I had a good time there. But in those days, pre-Martin Luther King assassination, if you were a student of color, your emphasis was assimilation. You made sure you spoke properly and you came to class dressed, and you didn't get into discussions of ethnicity because there was only one ethnicity, the Eurocentric ethnicity. And you were aspiring to fit into that. It's the days of Sidney Poitier, where everything about him was being clean and speaking properly and being accepted into the larger world. I loved Sidney Poitier. So a lot of my early behaviors on campus mirrored that. And then one day I was taking a train at 30th Street Station, and this guy got off the train, and it was like this magical glow. And he was with this beautiful, looked like a model, black woman. And they had all these cosmopolitan fashions, and it was Sidney Poitier. And I said, Mr. Poitier. And he said, how do you do, sir? And I was floating ever since,
Yeah.
I wanted to dress like that. I wanted to have that type of dialogue and conversation. And so those kind of role models, some that I actually had contact with and others that were imaginative, were kind of uppermost in my mind.
It's funny you mentioned that because my parents are in their 70s and they were big fans of Sidney Poitier for a lot of reasons, right? Like,
Yeah,
but definitely it was a symbol of what we perceived Black class to be. You know what I mean? They call me Mr. Tibbs and To Serve With
yeah,
Love played all the time in
yeah,
the house for that reason. So it's kind of funny you brought that full circle for me. You know?
yes, yes.
Uh,
The whole Black community, kind of felt great about Sidney Poitier because he was like the breakthrough guy. But then, when King came along, was the rise of identity politics, King and Malcolm X. And then I went to junior college in California, in Salinas, up in Central California, which was very close to Oakland and Berkeley. And so we would go up to Berkeley on the weekend, and there would be this group called the Black Panthers. And they'd have on the black leather jackets and the powder blue turtlenecks and the visible weapons. And for me, it was kind of the beginning of Black and Proud. Dick Gregory came to campus the night after King got shot, and everyone was expecting a comedy show. And he got into this thing about social responsibility, really opened my eyes. But because before that, I was your typical college jock, I wanted to be clean. I wanted to be hanging out at the party with the ladies and all of that. Didn't give very much thought to particularly my ethnicity, because that was something that was subdued. Because if you were an athlete, you were kind of more socially mobile. You function with whites and blacks,
mhm.
as opposed to if you were just a Black student, your world was pretty much predominantly Black. So being in college during those periods of assassinations uh, caused a psychological transformation. And I started considering who, what, where, and why about my identity.
So we're here talking about Chestnut Hollow Blues, Adventures of a Legitimate Child with Dr. Raymond Edward Janifer. I want to thank you so much for just coming on the show and discussing the book and the journey that you were on. If someone's like watching right now and they want to learn more about the book or purchase a copy of that book, how do they go about doing that?
Well, I know it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. So those are the two places that I know. And, some independent bookstores have picked it up. But I would suggest Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Easy peasy. I think I'll buy too many books from Amazon. My,
Well, I did too. I never read them, but I buy them.
But I can tell you one thing. This book is on top of my pile. Doctor, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Global Book Network, the show for authors and their stories. And hopefully wishing you the best of luck as this book gets read out to the masses.
Oh, can I tell you, it's going to be part of a 3-book series called the Chestnut Hollow Trilogy. Have you ever heard of John Edgar Wideman?
No, I haven't. Please tell me.
I wrote my dissertation on him. Senator Bill Bradley, John Wideman was his roommate at Oxford.
Oh.
And Wideman was the second African-American Rhodes Scholar in the 20th century, after Dr. Alain Locke out of the Harlem Renaissance. And I picked up a book one day and I looked at it to read it. And remember, I was admiring all the young Black guys that played college basketball. Wideman played basketball at Penn. So he and Bradley were teammates and roommates on the All England basketball team. So when they came back to the States, Bradley went to the Knicks and Wideman began writing. And so I read everything that he wrote, and I decided to do my dissertation on him.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a thing called the Homewood Trilogy, because he writes about being assimilated and being embarrassed by his family, which was lower class blacks. And then he went back to a funeral with his family. And, you know, they were doing after the funeral drinking and telling lies and laughing and joking. And he was listening to those voices. And he figured out, he said, well, whatever I am, Rhodes Scholar, college professor, writer, it came from these voices.
Mm.
And so he took those voices, incorporated it into his writing, and created something called the Homewood Trilogy. And it's a beautiful tri-piece of writing, 3 sections to it. Hiding place, his cousin who became a thug, pulled a armed robbery and hid out. Sent for You Yesterday is kind of an extended folk tale. You should check it out sometimes. It's called Homewood Trilogy.
Okay.
And so I took my neighborhood, Chestnut Hollow, and Chestnut Hollow Blues is the first one. Chestnut Hollow Redux is the second one, which means Chestnut Hollow Revisited. And the third one, the title is Waiting to Be Formulated,
Mm-hmm.
but I call it the Chestnut Hollow Trilogy.
Wow.
So I hope your audience will be looking for it.
Absolutely, they will. And I hopefully have you back when those books are out for us to check it out.
Great. Thank you, Flobo.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.